There are days when the world feels heavy. The news is loud, the pressures are many. And in those moments, we look for something simple, a good meal, a bit of entertainment to take our minds off things, a moment of peace. It's a deeply human need, isn't it? To feel secure and to be distracted from our worries. It's a need so old, so fundamental, that 2,000 years ago, the most powerful empire in the world built its entire strategy for survival around it. This is the story of Rome. Not the story of legions and conquest you might know, but a story about the heart of the city and the 1 million people who lived there. It's the story of a simple, powerful promise made by the emperors to its people. A promise of food and a promise of a show. They called it Panem et Circenses, bread and circuses. It was a bargain that kept the peace for centuries. But it came at a cost that would echo through history, and one we might still be paying today. To understand the bargain, you first have to understand the problem. Imagine the city of Rome in the 1st century. It's the biggest city the world has ever seen. 1 million souls packed into one space. For the rich, it was a city of marble villas and endless luxuries. But for most people, for the plebeians, it was a different world. It was a world of walk-up apartment blocks, poorly built and prone to fire. A world where work was scarce. For generations, the backbone of Rome had been the small farmer, the citizen soldier. But the empire's success had a strange side effect. The endless wars brought back immense wealth and hundreds of thousands of slaves. Rich landowners bought up all the small farms and worked them with slave labor. The small farmer couldn't compete, so they did the only thing they could. They packed up their families and moved to the city, looking for a new life. But there were no jobs. They were a people with nothing to do and very little to lose. A hungry, bored, and angry population is a dangerous thing for any ruler. The emperors knew they were sitting on a powder keg. They had to do something. Their solution had 2 parts. The first was simple and brilliant: bread, or more accurately, grain. They called it the Cranoni, the grain dole. It was the largest welfare program in the ancient world. Every month, the state gave a ration of grain for free to hundreds of thousands of Roman citizens. This wasn't just a handout. It was a lifeline. Think about what that meant for a family. It meant you wouldn't starve. It meant your children would have something to eat. No matter how bad things got, the grain would be there. It was a powerful message from the emperor. I will provide for you. I will keep you safe. The logistics were mind-boggling. Fleets of ships crossing the Mediterranean from Egypt and North Africa, all to bring this grain to the capital. It was a declaration of the empire's power, but it was also an admission of its greatest weakness: its total dependence on keeping the masses fed and quiet. But a full belly only solves half the problem. What do you do with people who have no work, no purpose? You give them the greatest show on earth. This was the second part of the bargain, the circuses. And the Colosseum was its grand cathedral. These weren't just games. They were state-sponsored spectacles on an unimaginable scale. Days and days of public holidays dedicated to entertainment. Gladiatorial combat was the main event. Men fighting to the death for the entertainment of the masses. We see it as brutal now, and it was. But for the Romans, it was more complex. It was a display of military valor, of courage in the face of death, the very virtues that had built the empire. It was also a raw, visceral distraction. For a few hours, the crowd forgot their troubles. They were united in the thrill, the horror, the spectacle. They were one with the emperor, who sat there with them, sharing in the experience. And if the Colosseum was about death, the Circus Maximus was about life and speed and passion. Chariot racing was the sport of the people. They had their favorite teams, their star drivers. The rivalries were fierce, sometimes even spilling into riots on the streets. It was pure adrenaline. For a few frantic laps, nothing else mattered but the race. It was a release valve for the entire city. And so the bargain was sealed. Free food to keep them from starving. Spectacular games to keep them from thinking. The Roman poet Juvenal was the one who gave it its name. He wrote, scornfully, that the people, long since cast off their cares, the people that once bestowed commands, consulships, legions, and all else, now meddles no more and longs eagerly for just two things: bread and circuses. He saw it as a decay of the Roman spirit. The people had traded their political power, their voice in the Republic, for cheap food and entertainment. And the emperors were happy to make that trade. The games were a way for the emperor to be seen, to be popular. The grain dole was a way to show his generosity. Together, they were the perfect tool of political control. An empty stomach can lead to revolution. A full stomach and an entertained mind leads to obedience. The cost of this policy was enormous. It drained the treasury and created a population dependent on the state. It may not have been the single reason Rome fell, but it was a symptom of a deep problem. A society that valued distraction over engagement. And this is where the story of Rome becomes our story. Because the formula is just too tempting for those in power to ignore. We may not have gladiators anymore, but we are surrounded by endless entertainment, endless distraction. We have access to more food more easily than any society in history. And so the 2,000-year-old question from Rome still hangs in the air. What is the bargain we are making? What do we trade for comfort and distraction? The story of bread and circuses isn't just about the Romans. It's a timeless warning. It asks us to look at our own world and to decide for ourselves what is truly important.